Hello and welcome to the Echo Chamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves, and today we're going to skip all the preliminaries and we're going to get straight into it, because the reason we're so keen to get started is because we're lucky to be joined by Josh Molloy, who actually has been on the ground in Syria and in the Middle East, and in the ongoing conflict that we've actually all been witness to for a number of years now. And we hear claims and counterclaims and propaganda, and we've seen so many fights. And I know myself and Martin have seen a lot of what happens online and goes down between fake news and all of this agenda. So we were really delighted that we got an opportunity to talk to someone who's been on the ground, has seen firsthand what is going on. And Josh, thank you so much for coming over and joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
No, I suppose the best place to start is with that. We're going to come with this almost in reverse order. You were on the ground. You've seen ISIS up close, and then you come back to Ireland.
Yeah.
And how did you find the reception, or what the perception of what's out there versus the reality of what's actually out there?
Well, there was a few big things that happened while I was away. There was the Paris attacks, the attacks in Brussels, and there was the peak of the Syrian refugee crisis. And that had all happened while I was there. And during that time, a lot of discourse surrounding these events kind of influenced the way people perceived what was going on. Whether it was different views on immigration and terrorism. And I think even yesterday I saw a YouGov poll conducted in different EU countries, and everyone cited terrorism and immigration as the number one concerns for Europe. So I think it was during that time, around 2015, that things started to escalate a lot more, and it started to influence discourse here, both on the far left, far right, and then eventually coalescing into like the mainstream. It was definitely, there was a lot of changes while I was away.
How far removed is the narrative over here from the reality over there?
It's completely different, because I think a lot of people chase what they want to believe, what fits into their narrative, what they're comfortable with. So if they feel supportive of the regime and they believe that Bashar al-Assad is the last hope for Syria, that he provides a secular future for the country, they will be liable to believe that chemical attacks were a false flag operation committed by the rebels, and that all of the rebels are either Al-Qaeda or ISIS.
But it's more complex than that. It is more complex, and it's more complex. Can you fill us in a bit on the different groups that are working there on the ground?
So you have the regime, you have ISIS, and we have the Kurds. Well, they're leading Syrian Democratic Forces, which is made up of several Arabs and some Assyrian Christians as well. But it's predominantly Kurdish led, and that's backed by the Americans and the coalition. And then on the other side, we have rebels such as like Ahrar al-Sham and various other groups that are backed by Turkey. And then we have some more that are like pariahs, where they're not backed by any state in particular. These jihadist factions. So the likes of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is an Al-Qaeda linked faction, used to be on Nusra Front. And we have Islamic State as well. I mean, these don't have any states backing them per se, but they are kind of operating.
And am I clear on this? There isn't really a good guy, bad guy in any of this. It's not. This is not going to be tidy. It's not going to go into boxes. There's bad and good everywhere over there.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You can look at like other conflicts, like Yugoslavia, the conflict there was like a very vicious ethnic conflict. This would be pretty much the same, but there'd be a lot more ideological elements involved. And I think that it makes the whole situation a lot more confusing. I think that's the main thing, is the ideologies involved.
Can I ask you about the white helmets? That's something that we consistently see over here, and there are really different views on what the white helmets are. You've been there, you've met them, you've dealt with them.
I've never met them.
Oh, right,
but,
sorry.
I know that their job is to rescue people from the rubble, from airstrikes. They are basically a civil defense, a Syrian civil defense, and it's something that's come up a lot when you come to regime apologists and people that would oppose the rebels here in the West. This kind of conspiracy theory that these guys are Islamic State. Some people just tar them both at the same brush, and they rely on very flimsy evidence or something, an image they saw on Facebook, social media, they put a red circle around something, and that's all the evidence they need, because it feeds into their narrative. Because I think there's a lot of psychology that, or psychological tests that have been conducted that shown we read things and look into things with a pre-existing view of.
Absolutely. I mean, it's confirmation bias all the time, and we only have to look at, even on a very micro level, what happened this week with Facebook and Google having to step back from ads in terms of even the 8th referendum to know that confirmation bias. And when we get bombarded with these things, it works.
Yeah.
You can manipulate people. You can sway people. There's a reason why people say Goebbels was good at what he did. He was good at what he bloody well did.
Yeah.
Didn't say it was for the better of mankind, but he was good at what he did. Taking that though, so we know there's the PKK. We know there's the Kurdish forces. We know there's the large swathes of the country. There's almost like a parallel stripe down the centre, and then there's the parts where the regime still hold power.
Yeah.
The country's very fragmented.
Yeah.
And it's, historically Syria has been made up of tribes anyway, for hundreds of years. It's, there's an argument that goes as part of, was it the Garden of Eden was either, I can't remember whether they falls on which side of the Syrian or Iraqi border, but there was kind of, this is how long it goes back. It's really culturally an important place, historically important place, but it was always a loose tribal system.
Yeah.
The narrative was that the Assad franchise, for want of a better word, kept it under wraps, and how it kept under wraps actually was through violence and oppression. And we know, Bashar's dad was a monster who destroyed Homs.
Yeah.
So it's not new. It's just new in the sense that people are actually choosing which monster to support.
Yeah.
And I think that's really critical here, that people who are saying, as you said, Assad is the only hope for Syria. That is, you are actually admitting then that you're taking this is the monster we're going to choose. And they're saying it's the argument of the lesser of two evils. Mm. You would hope we could aspire to better than that.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling us how you came to actually be somehow involved in this?
So I started watching, I guess I've always been interested in what goes on in the Middle East in general. And I started watching Islamic State videos.
Yeah.
And they all kind of portrayed this image of this really gruesome House of Horror style caliphate where people were executed in horrific ways and everything was really brutal. And that shocked me. I'd never seen anything like this before. And then I was kind of marrying that information that I got from their propaganda with the headlines I was reading, where they were taking Yazidi women as sex slaves and they were executing all the men and the elderly. And it was just this kind of onslaught of this horrific news. And I remember thinking, about Srebrenica and Rwanda and all these kind of things. Like we've always said, oh, never again, never again. And they just kind of, it was probably the first time I ever looked at something that was going on in the world, even though it was very far away, and felt connected to it and felt like I was affected by events that were going on there, that it was making me angry. And I did feel like I wanted to do something. And I knew that the West, there was like a lack of appetite for foreign interventions following the disaster in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I thought that chances of an international
coalition,
going in, boots on the ground just to save these people. Like, I didn't think it was a smart idea, obviously, just to invade the country or anything ridiculous like that. But I thought that
some humanitarian coalition could and should have been possible.
Yeah, to save lives. And that was it. And I felt inspired by the Kurds in Rojava in northern Syria. So they put up such a fierce resistance against these guys, and they were outnumbered and outgunned, and they didn't have any friends, you know, in the region. And it was that resistance that really inspired me, and I started to, as I learned more about them, about their beliefs and, you know, female empowerment and looking after the environment, all these different kind of ideas they had seemed to align with my own anyway. So it was obviously an attractive narrative to fight alongside who I perceive to be these heroes.
The good guys.
Yeah, against complete barbarity.
Yeah.
You know?
It's very interesting you talked about the female empowerment, because we know we've spoken to Norma Costello about her piece that she wrote about the female leaders, military leaders in the PKK and these groups, and she said how to talk about the propaganda again, how that was actually taken by both sides.
Yeah.
One on the left covered it and spoke about, you know, this being an example of what's wrong in where women are being pushed to the front line, and then people in Breitbart took it and pushed it out and said, "Look at the cowardly," you know. And it was just, you know, it's just amazing how even a very down the middle story about, as you said, inspirational people who are fighting back terrorism. And I don't like to use that word too much because it gets overused.
Yeah.
But just how that was manipulated to both sides.
Yeah.
Did the Kurds turn out to be what you expected them to be?
More so, actually. I was very impressed. They did actually practice what they were preaching. And they were ideologically motivated. They had this kind of idea, this Rojava state project, and, you know, democratic federalism and equal participation, sort of like a grassroots form of democracy. And they were very serious about implementing that. But when I had initially read about them and watched documentaries on them and stuff, I kind of, to go back to the women, I always assumed that they were like a propaganda thing, you know. Maybe there was maybe 10% of the force was women, and maybe they didn't actually fight. But when I got out there, it was close to 40% of the force were women, and they weren't carrying out logistical roles or anything like this. They were actually frontline fighters, and they were dying just like the men were dying, and they were engaging in hardcore combat just like everybody else. So, you know, when I saw that, and I think the regime has even trotted out women to show how secular and progressive they are as well. These women are all wearing eyeliner and makeup, and they have their nails done and everything. And it's the same of what they perceive a woman is to look like. How do we make her more feminine? We put loads of makeup on her, give her a uniform and a gun, and we'll show off how progressive we are. And it was the same with the female fighters in the Peshmerga. I mean, the most they would do is carry out security duties, maybe man checkpoints and search women, stuff like that.
Okay.
But with the YPJ, it was, you're all equal, and we're trying to empower women, and, you know.
And women fighting on the front line against ISIS. ISIS are a formidable enemy. Can you tell us a little about how formidable, because I've heard this, they're well funded, they're well trained, and they're learning all the time, and they don't stop. They simply keep coming.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Their tactics are evolving all the time. The most terrifying weapon they had was the V-bed, which is, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a Toyota Hilux usually, some kind of vehicle, and they put an armoured frame on it to make it bulletproof. And they'll even put these kind of plates on the side to protect the wheels, and they'll cut a small window, you know, just for the person driving to look out. And they'll pack this with explosives and drive this into a position, and it will just suddenly appear, and everyone will shoot the hell out of this thing. But it's bulletproof, and once it gets close enough, it blows up. And they're really deadly in urban environments. So, I mean, these guys, they're sort of like a kamikaze form of wheeled vehicles, you know, and they have a long line of people who volunteer to drive these things. So that, for example, just shows the fanaticism there.
And we had an Irish man that went that exact way. That's exactly how he went, driving one of those.
Yeah, Kelly and
the jihadi paddy.
Yeah. So, you know, and this is the thing, a lot of guys go over there to die, and a lot of these guys are foreigners as well, so people who would have travelled over there to join Islamic State or make hijrah, as they say.
Yeah,
And they join and they will volunteer. And we've seen the application forms. They'll say, I want to be a suicide bomber.
It says that on the application forms. I want to be a suicide bomber.
Yeah, but you want to be a fighter or whatever, and suicide bomber is one of the choices. They fight this sort of Salafi jihadi version of conventional warfare, very like apocalyptic and suicidal form of all or nothing fighting. And then they also fight this kind of hybrid war, whereas this insurgency behind the front line in their enemies' areas that they control.
Once they capture the areas, yeah.
Yeah, so they would have sleeper cells left behind to plant bombs. Another thing they used to do was carry out these Inhimashi operations where they would shave their beards, cut their hair, wear the same uniforms as us, and penetrate behind enemy lines, behind our lines, and basically just start killing until they'd fight to the last bullet and then blow themselves up. They had suicide vests. So they were fighting this kind of very crazy kind of war. And very hard to kind of compete with that when you actually do care about your life, but these people, it's not to say that they don't care about their life, but they're chasing death and they're chasing martyrdom. And
wasn't that well, I made this point to Martin previously. I think that was one of the I think it was Al-Zahari, or I think Bin Laden is credited, but I think it was Al-Zahari who came up with it, where all you have to do to become a member of Al-Qaeda at the time was wake up, take your camera phone out and make a short video telling them that you're a member, and then going off and doing your atrocity. And people could say, well, they claimed, ISIS claimed responsibility, Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility. These people, when you're radicalized to that level where you've just committed to actually doing something that just, look, your life is expendable anyway, you think about it in those terms, it's very hard to fight it's not an even battle, as you say yourself. Like, I mean, imagine trying to you going out and fighting in a structured warfare way. You've been trained, you've learned all of these techniques, and these guys come in with they're going to lay their own lives out.
Yeah. Like with like these terrorist attacks that we're talking about earlier, like the one in Paris yesterday. It's the same sort of thing. Like, they say that ISIS usually waits till the attacker is dead before they claim responsibility. And there is this kind of, some people think, they claim everything, and there is this and that. There was an incident where they claimed the Las Vegas shooting.
Yeah.
And that was really bizarre. That came at a tough time for them. Maybe they were under pressure. Maybe that was just an attempt at confusing people. There's a lot of analysts that were following this at the time and couldn't really make sense of it. And they still can't really make sense of why they did claim that particular incident. But I mean, it's the thing is, it's not that difficult to make a video, but I always find this puzzling. It's not that difficult to make a video and claim responsibility and all this, but
exactly,
these guys don't do that. They just go out and do it.
This is the real guys.
These people who, like, say, the London Bridge attackers, or the incident that happened in Paris yesterday, where one person was killed. There's these incidents, they can just happen spontaneously, and I think there's a lot of effort in trying to understand why people do this, and whether they feel disillusioned with society, or whether they, there's this and that. And
what would be your opinion on
it? I think that to be honest, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. I came back, and after everything I saw over there, I've been trying to understand what it was that made people do this. It made people willing to jump into these vehicles and drive themselves to death, and what made people willing to fight to the death. I'm still trying to understand that, and there's a lot of people offering a lot of answers at the moment, and I've read a lot of books about the ideology and about the history of the movement. I've even gone onto the Telegram channels and tried to just kind of lurk in there and look at what they're talking about in the chat rooms to try and understand this kind of jihadi subculture and try to get to grips with it. But there is it seems that there is a fetishization of death, to a weird kind of degree.
And they've been called a death cult. ISIS have been called a death cult. And is that, in your opinion, are they a death cult?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
So they're going to go to the last man.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of their recent videos is called Till the Final Hour. And there's always kind of this is a reoccurring theme throughout a lot of their propaganda. A lot of the messages that seem to be pushing out there about chasing death,
Well, and the narrative we've gotten back, particularly from the West, is that they've been defeated in Afghanistan, that they've been pushed back in Iraq. But is that the actual case? Are they getting smaller? Are they getting more powerful? What's your feeling on it?
Well, they're no longer holding territory like they used to, controlling these large geographical areas. Some people are even talking about how they're going to revert back to an insurgency. As I was saying before, when they were fighting this hybrid kind of warfare against us,
They were already.
yeah, they never stopped being an insurgency, which is something I think they'll just remain to be for the future.
Do they cease to be a caliphate then after that? If they're going to be more insurgents, then they're not really caliphate at that stage.
No,
But they can't be a caliphate anymore. They don't hold enough land.
no, just a few patches in the desert, and it's that kind of appeal that they did have, that kind of legitimizing kind of factor of actually holding the territory and actually establishing the caliphate. That's gone now, so maybe there's a lot of their appeal is gone. We'll see in the coming years.
So that might slow recruitment.
I think so, definitely. I think there's already been signs of that as well. But that was one thing that struck me from being over there, is how many people had actually travelled over. You'd find documents belonging to foreigners from Dagestan, Chechnya, Kyrgyzstan, Indonesia,
And there is I've heard that there's a Chechen cohort over there that are just vicious beyond anything we could imagine.
They're the best fighters. They had the best equipment, AK-74s and M203.
And they have the experience of really hard on the ground fighting as well. Really tough on the ground fighting.
They've got a reputation over there. I think earlier on in the Syrian civil war, they kind of marked out this reputation as being the best fighters. And they're probably the most professional, more soldier-like units within ISIS. And there's definitely, obviously, a few still alive, I'm sure. Some have gone back to Chechnya or to Dagestan or wherever they came from.
And is there many jihadis, because this is a constant narrative here, do we have a jihadi problem in Ireland? Do we have an ISIS problem in Ireland? We get it quite a lot, that one of these fear things we should all fear.
Pat Kenny said this week on to Edwina Curry on the radio. They were talking about Brexit, and he said, what if you have a Syrian in the boot? Now, first of all, Pat, that's a horrendous thing to have even said on the national airwaves, and for it not to have been picked up. Why do we have a broadcasting authority? I don't know.
Yeah.
But in terms of fear and stoking fear, a Syrian in the boot. I happen to know a few Syrians. One of them plays football down in the Fina there. Very, very talented person. I'd rather them sit in the car with me rather than put them in the boot. But it's that kind of what Martin is referring to, I suppose, is, we have seen where people involved in the London attacks had been based here, and we had this. If you think of the Dundalk attack as well, where they
immediately
jumped and said that this was. Well, I think that one of the headlines was it begins or something like that. Something as hyperbolic as that. It begins, as if we were facing into we were going to be overthrown by
ISIS.
I think unfortunately now we live in a world where people, no one's buying newspapers as much anymore, and people are these companies that these papers, media outlets kind of rely on clicks to generate ad revenue, so they'll kind of make it's where clickbait has come from and everything. I think they'll make something as sensationalized as possible, something that will be as polarizing as possible to generate the most interactions and stuff. And I think something like that, let's say a schizophrenic person who starts stabbing people in a shopping center somewhere in Spain or something like that, they'll very quickly kind of even if those facts are clear, they'll obviously, the headline will be, several casualties and mass stabbing attack in Spain shopping mall, and you'll click on that and think, well, that's probably an ISIS attack, even if those facts were already established, even if it was very clear, oh no, this is just a case with mental illness involved or something like that. And the far right will always kind of cling to that anyway, it was still a terrorist attack in their kind of view.
But do you think we have much to worry about in Ireland?
I think we're probably just as vulnerable as other countries. I don't think there's a major threat, but I think we do need to realize that just, some people think that we're a neutral country and because we don't get involved in things over there that we'd be safe. I do think they would see us as legitimate target because the whole kind of, the language they're using is kill Kafar, kill Kafar.
So you're just Western, that's it, full stop.
Pretty much, yeah. And, we've seen from their attacks that this is like, this isn't where like the leadership is dispatching people. If the leadership had the capability to dispatch cells wherever it wanted to, of course it would pick places like London and Berlin and wherever.
Barcelona.
Yeah. But these are guys who are just taking it upon themselves to carry out these attacks, and ISIS is happy to claim them. So, it's not up to ISIS leadership to decide we're going to attack Dublin next or anything. It's just up to some, 19, 20-year-old guy.
Random.
Yeah. Who just decides to do it one day. I think that's where the threat comes from, is that unpredictability of where it's coming from next. These aren't like fingertips, touching every city in Europe. These are just individuals who are taking it upon themselves that may be in contact with people online. But there is no overall strategy where these cells are being dispatched to various places to carry out attacks.
Yeah, that is Project Fear. That's Project Fear. That's the guy that says, turn the ships back, let them drown in the Mediterranean because ISIS put 4 people on that boat and they're coming. That's the issue, Martin, because what happens then is we lose our humanity when we start to dehumanize people. And the EU has polarized in the last few years, particularly during this crisis. And what we've seen is, the rise of the far right, and we've seen where borders are going up and freedom of movement is getting harder. When realistically, it's any student of history will know that the straight line maps drawn all over the Middle East weren't drawn by choice by the occupants of the Middle East. They were drawn by us in the West.
Yeah.
So you create the conditions for a conflict, and then you say nothing to do with us, Gov. Sorry, but it just doesn't actually stand up to any scrutiny whatsoever.
I mean, that's one of the first things that ISIS did, bulldoze the border, and they referenced Sykes-Picot Agreement. So,
and they did actually. They went straight to a barren bit of land and bulldozed just to show that it was Sykes-Picot was no more.
Yeah, and that was widely symbolic, like something that a lot of people maybe in the West might not have heard of Sykes-Picot, but you can guarantee every kid in Iraq and Syria would have learned about Sykes-Picot in school. So this is something that they saw kind of carving out this new state, defying nation states, kind of creating the new project.
And the French say, "Oh, we'll take that bit of Lebanon that we like, and we'll give that." Oh, look, we know, and the Kurds getting told again, "No, sorry lads, no land for you." So like these things are echo through time. And, I think at the same time Sykes-Picot was going on, we were starting the East Horizon over here, So it's not that long ago. But if you were, as you said, if you were studying a history book in any of these countries, it's a big thing to kids coming up. We talked about in our school system. We all became there was an element of whatever you did. It's about 5th year history, I think, Martin. You became an armchair Republican. You had read, here's Cromwell.
It would have been the same kind of thing over there.
Yeah.
It would have been. Everyone would have understood what had happened. That, you talk to any taxi driver on our bill, they'll tell you that, the same sort of stories,
It's a collective history or a collective memory that they have, that they were wronged.
Yeah, definitely. Like a memory or a narrative that would be...
Yeah. Same as we have with,
the
Brits in italics. I don't mean the Brits.
Yeah.
But you come back to the Kurds. Tell us a bit about the Kurds' relationship with the Turks. That's very fraught.
Yeah. So there's an insurgency been going on for, I think, 30 to 40 years in Turkey, the PKK. And the YPG would be sort of an intellectual extension of the PKK. And there's definitely connections there as well, both military and logistical. And anyone involved with them knows this. The Americans are well aware of this as well. And they have tried their best to appease Turkey, because it's an important NATO ally, by supporting several Arab groups instead, and trying to avoid getting too stuck into a deep relationship with the Kurds, because they knew that that would upset Turkey. So there was these efforts that were ongoing for a while, and eventually they scrapped all these programs because it just wasn't working. There was like a horrendously long vetting program that they had to carry out, and they managed to train several small numbers. I think it might have just scores of fighters, nothing that would make a massive impact on the ground. And a lot of these guys either surrendered or defected or were killed very quickly. So all these programs failed, and eventually, I think, looking for a solution and a reliable partner on the ground, they eventually just bit the bullet and just thought, right, we're going to go and
go with the Kurds.
Yeah, as much as possible. The support did start around Battle of Kobani. And that's where it really started, but then it was very limited, and it was almost like apprehensive airstrikes. There was no real there's no real presence on the ground. But as time went on and they started to throw their weight behind the Kurds more, they started to, you started to see boots on the ground. You started to see American Special Forces every now and then. And
do they make a big difference when you have them? Do they make a big difference?
They're not fighting, essentially. They kind of, they're in the background, monitoring what's going on, probably relaying information to their commanders. And this is in the beginning. I think they did play a more of an active role in the Battle for Raqqa, but before that they were just kind of monitoring the situation.
Was it a two-way intelligence thing? You were getting intelligence from them; they were handing off getting intelligence from you.
I think they were basically helping coordinate the airstrikes. That was the main thing, and kind of sending the bigger picture to their colleagues who were sending that information to the aircraft, and just kind of keeping the whole thing rolling forward.
And was air support a game changer?
Oh, definitely. I mean, Kurds outnumbered, no guns, and they're fighting guys who are very well armed, and they had a lot of armoured vehicles and tanks and all the rest of it, and there was definitely, if there was no air support, I don't think...
they were screwed.
Yeah.
Who's giving them the equipment? Where are they getting the equipment? Because we've seen these flatbeds, we've seen these fabulous flatbeds out there that you'd love to have yourself. I mean, these all cost money, up just the armoured vehicles, the weaponry, ammunition. I mean, they must be absolutely flying through ammunition. Where are they getting all of this stuff from?
In the beginning, I remember wondering that myself, where do all these Toyota Hiluxes come from? And there were so many of them. I never, none of us ever knew. And that they seem to be coming quite earlier on in the war. So I know that someone was giving them support.
Do you remember the old story about, I think it was when Robert Fisk went to meet Bin Laden for the second time, and he was picked up in Afghanistan in the dark of night and dragged into a jeep and bundled into it, and then up the what's the mountain range?
Tora Bora.
Could be a Tora Bora, but either way, they take the mask off and he sees the expanse and he's hanging off he's driving along the edge of a cliff and he's looking down and he's just thinking, well, we're going to die on this road. And the driver turns to him and says, Toyota good for jihad.
Yeah. We used to laugh about that whenever we were driving in a convoy on operation. They used to make a brilliant ad for Toyota. Just every single vehicle was a Toyota Hilux, and they've become remarkably well known now.
They are.
They are exactly what you need for conflict. I mean, in and out, fast, small vehicle, hard to spot.
Yeah.
And they have the flatbed where you can sit a dozen guys, you'll sit 10 guys in the back of the flatbed.
And they'll cram as many people as possible in, and usually they get a bucket of water and they'll smear mud all over it, because all of these are white Toyotas.
Yeah.
And whenever there's an operation or something, they'll smear it with dust and mud and camouflage it all over the windscreen and everything, try and take the shine out of it and everything. So it's an adaptable thing. They kind of figured out, multiple ways of using the vehicle.
Yeah.
Can I ask now, sadly, we've seen President Trump withdraw from the Iran deal. We know the Iranian Revolutionary Guard are the real force in the regime force. We know, is it the General Suleiman? Am I pronouncing that correctly? He's the actual tactical brain of the Syrian forces, the Bashar al-Assad forces. And now we see Israel and what is in effect Iran trading rockets at one another.
Yeah.
I'm painting a very bleak picture here. Where do you think this is going?
I remember I was reading that the Israelis don't want war. Essentially, this was there's a lot of commentary about the Iran nuclear deal, and they were waiting for Trump to pull out before they retaliated because these blows had been traded between the two states for a while. I don't know. I honestly have no idea. I've heard a lot about fears about Hezbollah being highly motivated after this conflict, and gaining so much combat experience and being eager for a scrap with Israel. It's very difficult to predict what could happen. Anything could happen very quickly over there. Like I said, I have no idea, but I would, if I was to guess, I'd say that the Iranians they've got enough on their plate at the moment.
Yeah, they couldn't possibly extend themselves. I couldn't imagine. And that's also, that's also something where we say when the Iran deal was actually working, they hadn't missed one target in the Iran deal as far as I'm aware. It was my understanding of it. There was no reason for Trump to withdraw other than to pal around with Netanyahu or whatever was the agenda. But it would just concern me that there is an element of, with someone like Donald Trump, that the closer Mueller gets, the more erratic he seems to be on a geopolitical sense, and I don't know. I don't want to be all pessimistic.
I kind of have a different view on you there, Tony. Nothing consolidates support at home like a war abroad, and that goes for both Trump and for Hezbollah and also for Israel. And nothing consolidates support at home like a war abroad. Only
one US wartime president ever lost an election.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I can't see, it's just my personal feeling, because Trump is such sort of a rogue character, and what he says about foreign policy and what he does about foreign policy are kind of very, very different things.
Yeah.
I would be very surprised if he'd get through 8 years without some conflict. Very surprised.
Did you ever hear Saddam's saying what politics is? You probably know it, Josh, do you? Saddam said politics is telling my cabinet I'm doing one thing, telling the government the ministers that I'm doing another thing, and then doing what I wanted to do myself all along.
Yeah, I've never heard that one.
Yeah.
Really accurate.
That was.
Do you see any long-term hope for Syria first, and then for the region after that? How are they going to? Is Syria going to reconsolidate into a unified country? Is it going to be a power within the area, or is it just going to keep going on like this? Or is Assad going to go? Is he essentially just a puppet now of somebody else?
Well, this is the thing. Like, the most important kind of geopolitical factor in Syria at the moment is probably the American presence with the SDF. We've seen French troops being placed there as well to kind of prevent them from being attacked by Turkey, which has recently invaded in the Kurdish area called Afrin. So we don't know. There's a lot of big powers there. The Americans have kind of talked about sending an Arab force in to protect the Kurds, which probably wouldn't go down very well because the Kurds and the Arabs don't have much of a good history and within that particular region. So it's quite difficult to tell what will happen. How long this presence will be there for, how long will the Russians stay involved, how long will the Americans stay involved.
We're kind of in a proxy. As you said, ISIS have withdrawn to a couple of areas. So the war that's there now is kind of a proxy war, even though there are plenty of groups involved. They're aligned one way or another. There's the odd rogue group are there just fighting for money. There is proper mercenaries over there fighting just for money.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, the general public, when America will ask, ISIS is defeated now, why are we still there? And this will happen, and there'll be, these are the issues that are coming up on the horizon. And ever since, even as far back as 2014, people are asking what's going to happen once ISIS is defeated. What will happen to these contested areas and control of various other factions. We saw in Kirkuk between the Kurds and the Central Iraqi government.
Are we back to another situation where the West is going to draw a map for the region?
Well, you never know. I think they're kind of keen to kind of wrap this up. and
Is that
get
your
home.
sense of it, that they want out?
I think so, because it is a very complicated situation. I don't think they're going to abandon anyone, but I don't know. Again, like, I can't tell. I can only.
And are
make
the Kurds wary of the support that they have, that it could be taken away quite quickly?
Yeah.
Think about it in terms of Afghanistan. Every American analyst who'll talk about it will admit they lost.
Yeah.
Every American analyst will admit they lost. They now negotiate with the Taliban. They now accept that they don't control large swathes of the country, and they now accept that they have absolutely less influence than there's a central government that rules over less land than Taliban holds. Like, it's just, they've lost. You don't see that in your mainstream narratives, but they're the facts on the ground. You'd wonder when this goes back, when they withdraw, and they say leave them to it.
Yeah.
You know, that's a very scary prospect, that if we create a vacuum, something will rush into it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm getting really pessimistic today, guys. I'm sorry.
I'm going to ask you. You've been very good to come in here and talk to us, Josh. Really, really good. But I've one last question for you, and it goes all the way back.
Yeah.
When you first started watching the jihadi stuff online, and you said, I have to make a difference, I'm in a position that I can make a difference, and you went and you've fought the good fight, and you're back home now, did you achieve what you thought you'd achieve when you set out?
I definitely participated, and I still believe that I was motivated by the right reasons. But once I got out there, the reality on the ground kind of introduced me to different feelings about the real motives behind states and what was really going on there. And while I had this honest belief that we were fighting a good fight and what we were doing was noble and we were on the right side of history, I felt like none of that really mattered. We're in a crazy situation where martyrdom is venerated, and the entire generation of people is being, wiped out. The future young people.
Yeah.
And we have states that were pulling the strings, and various other powers and geopolitical, factors involved. It just felt like what we were doing was really futile. In the end, it wouldn't matter, It felt quite sad. It's quite a pessimistic point to kind of finish on. But that's how I felt at the time, and I hope I'm wrong, but we'll see.
So I try and phrase this because I don't know. Your war, and you have a military background, so you ended up literally not fighting for any of that, just for the guy beside you or the woman beside you. Am I right about that? That's where it ended up, with that relationship.
Yeah, that was what kept me there.
Okay.
That was once I kind of had different feelings about what we were doing, that was the only thing. Kind of feeling of camaraderie.
Okay, so it's a cliche, but war is hell, but you're there for the guy beside you.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us, Josh. Really fabulous conversation. Really fabulous.
And look, mate, it's really, we know people who are going to come, and they've all, as you said, we started this conversation just to reflect on the fact that there's misinformation, there's disinformation, there's propaganda and counter propaganda. I think you talked about the futility of war, and I think we know that, but I think you've actually put it to us in such a lovely way that I hope anybody's listening wakes up to take their head out of their arses and rise above all of the noise, and actually understand that at the end of the day, people are dying, people will continue to die, and we need to actually put some political pressure, even if that's all we can do. We need to try that, because the simple fact is, the big players don't care about the people standing on the front line.
No.
But yeah, I echo Martin's thoughts. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Guys, again, thanks for listening. Make sure you leave us a review. Please tell your friends. Please share the news. We rely on you. That's our only channel to get our voices out there. So thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye bye.